Welcome to our workshop, Hidden Carers, Hidden Skills, ensuring the voice of expert carers are heard. I've already given our introductions. Slide 2. As we all know, a diagnosis of dementia is given not just to one person, it's given to a spouse, a partner, a child, and the extended family. Created by Carers for Carers, we are a national and independent, fully inclusive and diverse network, representing carers and former carers of all dementias, ages, cultures, religions and orientation. Carers are often the advocates for the person they care for, especially in the advanced stages of dementia, as Shahid and I both experienced. And this is so important, especially in terms of research and campaigning for improvements in support and care. A prime example of this was, at the request of the Department of Health, Tide organised engagement sessions with carers to input to the implementation plan for the 2020 Challenge on Dementia. This resulted in recognition that carers from Tide must be involved in the new Citizens Panel, which will hold to account those responsible for the delivery of the plan. When Shahid and I discussed what we were going to do in this workshop, we discovered that we had quite a lot of things in common. We both cared for our mothers, we both had worked in the public sector, and we both took early retirement to care for them. Even though we both willingly did this, we both suffered from bouts of depression and social isolation. And even though we're different cultures, that spreads right across any care, I think. Neither of us had any idea of the care sector, so we only knew the public sector, but we both realised that the skills we gained in the public sector were quite useful when we were carers as well. But also learnt that so many transferable skills from when you're caring can be used in other fields. And that's not often recognised, because carers, once the caring role's ended, they've often given up their job and really don't have anywhere to go. Tide can develop these skills that carers have. So we've got a development programme to do this. But talking of our similar backgrounds in the public sector, I decided to adapt something that I wrote for a training session we had. And I gave it the title, Is Caring at Home a Cottage Industry Where Family Carers Are the Skilled Workforce? I often referred to caring for my mum at home for 10 years as a cottage industry. She used to sit regally in her hospital bed, under the stairs in the sitting room, we used to call her Harry Potter, in my very small cottage-style house, with a constant hum of her air mattress sounding like a factory or busy office. As far as I was concerned, she was the CEO, the boss, always the boss, Mum was. And as with any business, she had her operations manager, and that was me, the carer, who saw to the day-to-day running. For several of the years, whilst I was caring for Mum, I was also working in the civil service and would often look at the opportunities for promotion. All the jobs advertised required certain competencies. And I often used to think I could fill those jobs, those competencies, with just the skills I gained as a carer. So it got me thinking. Slide 3. Competencies such as time management, managing a team, communicating well, adjusting to change, and problem solving. Shahid and I will now talk about these competencies in relation to our caring roles. Time management, or as I call it, a carer is never off the clock. I was fortunate enough to be on flexi time anyway, so I'd virtually done a day's work before I even got into work. But even when I was at work, I was managing Mum's time at home, making sure Mum's care workers arrived on time and dealing with the problems when they called. In the early days, when Mum was semi-mobile and I was still working full-time, she would go to the local daycare centre, albeit very reluctantly. It was like trying to get her off to school or something. She used to hold on to the table. But she had to go there because I had to work. Most carers will recognise the tone of laying the guilt trip on the carer when the home would ring and say, "Mum's not too well today, is she?" So kind of blaming me that I'd sent her there when she was ill, but she was fine when she went in the morning. What they didn't know was that she'd been a leading light in local amateur dramatics since the age of 14. And she had many what I came to call her Gwyneth Paltrow moments, where she would pretend to be ill if she didn't want to be there. I would have to leave work, go and pick up this seemingly lifeless person slumped in the chair from the centre, only for her to spring to life and ask what's for tea as soon as we got home. I have to say I couldn't blame her, she just wanted to be at home with me. But my point is that as a carer, you're never off the clock, no matter where you are. And you have to manage your time and have to make up that flexi time as well. But it's very difficult. Number 2, managing a team. I managed the care workers on Mum's behalf. We also became a team and I got to know who was best at doing certain tasks. As Mum's condition became worse, I ensured the team expanded to cope and I mucked in where necessary. I also managed a direct payments account, employing a personal assistant and dealt with the monthly accounts, so finance officer, sometimes HR as well. Thankfully, the difficult task of telling the care agency not to send a certain care worker was quite rare. But it had to be done, and I feel that the fault often lies with failings in the agency's recruitment and training process. I was proud to be an honorary care worker and think that the work they do is incredible, but all too often undervalued in terms of recruitment, training, respect and pay. Shahid will now talk about communicating well and adapting to change.
Thank you, Louise. Good afternoon, everyone. I think the title of this workshop was particularly pertinent to me, the silent carer part. I think what we find is that there are a number of silent carers within more minority groups within the BME community, of which I was one. As a carer, I think I was wearing many, many hats, which would include liaising with... Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. Oh, I'll try and get these mics. Is that better?
You do speak quietly sometimes as well. So yeah.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Okay. So I was wearing many hats, I believe, as a carer, liaising regularly with health and social care professionals, and instinctively learnt to alter my language depending on who I was speaking to. And on reflection, I think I was also my mum's care coordinator. There was simply so much to do and so many responsibilities that I had to take on as a carer. So it kind of goes with the territory that to live well with a person who has dementia, you have to be able to communicate well with all sorts of people. But especially when there isn't even a name for the condition in my community, in many South Asian languages for dementia, it becomes even more difficult. And carrying out an assessment is a whole separate discussion, something I won't mention today because it really gets my goat. There's a real issue with having appropriate diagnostic tools for people from minority communities. The strain of caring became so untenable. So, we consulted with our local mufti. Mufti is someone who's a senior scholar in Islam, to seek an Islamic ruling on whether we should consider respite for my mum, or even, consider putting mum into a specialist dementia nursing home. The Imam advised that if it was in mum's best interest, then it would be permitted. The perception was, I suppose, in the community and in family was that by not continuing to care for my mum, that perhaps I wasn't fulfilling my duty as a son. And it was only after getting the authority from the Imam we were able to arrange a meeting with the extended family, with psychiatrists, community nurse, and various others at the memory clinic. It was decided at the time that it was in mum's best interest to admit her into a specialist dementia nursing home. The staff there were generally okay, and I had to work with them on issues such as mum's diet, her religious and cultural needs in terms of her praying and wearing a headscarf and so on. What I did find, however, was that people like my mum's healthcare specialist or professionals, in their naivety, would often point out to me that there aren't many people Asian or Muslim from your community in care homes, because it isn't what they do. And, you know, you look after your own, don't you? So I was getting these very ignorant and naive comments from these people. And that would depress me. And I felt I had to constantly explain my circumstances, in that the family dynamics in minority communities, the South Asian community, are changing. Adapting to change, the third competence. I gave up employment to become a full-time carer with my wife. And my children were also young carers. And to be honest, we didn't even think about the financial implications that we would have to deal with. Mum was my number one priority, and I would do anything for her at that time. There was no induction period or a training course that you can enrol on to be a carer. While I'm not overly comfortable with being labelled a carer, I can understand that I was indeed my mum's carer. As far as I was concerned, I was simply looking after my mum, fulfilling my duty as a son. And apart from the day-to-day caring role that I shared with my wife, I would also coordinate with personal care suppliers, ensuring that we had everything that mum needed. The experience of 24/7 caring did lead to me suffering from stress, depression, poor physical health, and disturbance in family relations. We encountered social isolation, not just within our extended family, but within the community also, because of the stigma attached to dementia, because of the reasons I mentioned earlier about there's no word for dementia in many South Asian languages. However, I do feel that it affects all carers, some of these issues, but it's more pertinent amongst South Asian and BME carers because of the cultural and social expectations. After Mum went into the nursing home, we had to listen to very negative and ignorant comments from the extended family and also the community. And I would often say to them, live in my shoes as a carer just for 24 hours, to which there'd be no reply. But it's also worth emphasising that as a family, we had to deal with Mum's healthcare needs in the household while maintaining a family life. It became very straining for everyone and extremely stressful for my wife and myself. My wife was my absolute rock throughout the whole period. She cared for my mum as though she was her own. She provided Mum's personal care and supported me and our children. I would like to emphasise that Saima, my wife, had a voice in her own right as a carer. And it's something that I didn't take for granted at all. But we have to also understand and accept that there are some South Asian daughter-in-laws in the community who are only related to the person that they're caring for through marriage, but they may not always have a voice. And this comes through when I speak to carers and families in the community that I work in. So it's all important to understand that this dynamic of they look after their own is definitely changing. And in fact, what we are seeing is increasing social isolation among South Asian elders in what are still relatively insular communities where everyone knows each other's business and family backgrounds. They're definitely not hard to reach, perhaps easier to ignore.
Thank you, Shahid, for that great insight. I think that communities we often don't, as you say, easy to ignore rather than hard to reach. The last competence is mine, and that's problem solving, or as I like to call it, research and development. In the office, I'm known as Gadget Girl, as I'm always on the lookout for equipment to enable me to do things better. As Shahid has found out, I've got a whole case full of things. I was the same when I cared for Mom, and everyone was fascinated with an inflatable bed I found for her on the inflatable bath I found for her on the internet, after she'd been bedridden for several years. The bath fit on her bed, we rolled her into it, inflated it with a foot pump, and then filled it with water. Mom loved it. Imagine not being able to have a bath for years. Unfortunately, as with all equipment, it's usually the fault of the operator when things go wrong. I suppose it's appropriate that I work for an organisation called Tide, as we ended up with a mini tsunami in my living room when I deflated the bath too quickly before it had fully emptied. On the positive side, Mum's safety was never at risk. She slept all the way through it, as she usually did. And my living room floor had the best clean it had had for years. My house was eventually jokingly labelled the university by Mum's care workers. And as I became more heavily involved in local carers issues, we were often used as guinea pigs for new services. And one of them was a pilot for a moving and handling service, which I'm pleased and proud to state is still in existence today. The service vastly improved our quality of life, and I'm sure it continues to do for others. These are just a few examples from mine and Shahid's experience, and I'm sure other carers and former carers can provide many more examples. Sadly, when Mum passed away, I couldn't bear the silence after the constant hum of her hospital bed. It had become a kind of heartbeat I'd lived with for many years. Like an empty and redundant factory or office, my home became a soulless house where I didn't want to be. When I went back to work, that became meaningless too. And I didn't want to be there either, and I think Shahid's the same. I later realised that I'd come to identify myself solely as a carer. And when it ended, I didn't know who I was anymore. Apart from the grief, I felt lost and redundant. Fortunately, my involvement in local carers issues led me to involvement in national projects and also previous network, Dementia UK's Uniting Carers. I was then trained in public speaking to speak at the UK Dementia Congress a few years ago. I then became Carers Coordinator for the Carers Call to Action and now have the wonderful role in supporting Tide carers to do similar. This is how I know Tide works, as I've been on that journey. And I know that feeling of belonging to a network of like-minded people where I was finally understood. Slide 4, Shahid. These are the 7 aims of our mission, which I won't read out. And Shahid found his calling too.
Having worked in the public sector for over 24 years, I've been able to use my skills, knowledge and experience as a carer and campaigning on BME dementia issues. Following my initial campaigning, I set up BME Health and Wellbeing network to support local people from the BME and the South Asian community, supporting carers and people with dementia, carrying out networking activities, raising awareness, educating and mobilising the community on issues related to dementia, mental health and end-of-life care. Since I started on my campaign, I've spoken to around 700 people from the South Asian community in Urdu, Punjabi and in English. I've delivered talks on dementia and cultural awareness to around 150 police officers at the Rochdale Division. I've also delivered training to the Stroke Association at their North West Dementia Conference. And last year, I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to speak at the opening plenary of the UK Dementia Congress in Brighton last year, supported by Tide.
Thank you, Shahid. So what happens to all the knowledge and skill gained by both current and former carers? Is it wasted? Hopefully not, especially if they join Tide. For all those carers and former carers who have had to give up work or simply want a new direction in life, Tide can help them realise they have these amazing skills. For those carers who are still in work, Tide can help educate them, their co-workers, employers on their rights and how they should be treated. It makes sense to have a national independent and diverse network like Tide as a go-to organisation for confident, well-educated and well-prepared carers who are supported practically, psychologically and emotionally when they represent Tide in research, training, at meetings, events and conferences, usually by me. This can often lead to employment for some because they gain that extra confidence and they're able to go out. I'm one of the lucky ones in that I found a new sense of purpose with the Carers Call to Action and now Tide, which is its legacy. And Shahid is a great example and ambassador for Tide, having been able to improve his skills as a natural, competent, articulate speaker and communicator, with Tide's encouragement and training as part of our development programme. So much so that he spoke as part of the opening plenary, again, at last year's UK Dementia Congress, accompanied by Janice, who was supposed to be here, but I don't think she's arrived. They were both amazing. We hope that the tide can also turn for the many carers and former carers out there. Or perhaps, like my mum's inflatable bath, we need a mini tsunami for all these skills to be recognised by others and perhaps more importantly, by carers and former carers themselves. Thank you, and over to questions. To Ronnie's now. We're still supposed to have
The
a
question.
few questions, but we haven't. But has anybody got any questions in your?
Can't see in the dark.
Oh. There's a lady over there. Oh, they're there. Sorry. All right.
Oh, they've come.
So yeah.
This is a vote
So,
topic.
according to the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Dementia Research and the Alzheimer's Society, estimated that the number of carers of people with dementia in the UK is currently, how many do you think? Come on there.
You once they've all voted. You should use your. There we go. 150,000.
No. The correct answer is 670,000. But that was, I think that's 2015. And again, you know, as Shahid said, there could be people hidden. I think it'd be a lot more than that. But even if we had 1% of those carers, that's not counting the former carers, that would be 6,700 to join and speak on behalf of those that can't speak for themselves.
Second question.
Second question, yeah. Now Shahid informed me that these figures are from 2011.
2011 census, yes.
Okay.
Read it.
Yeah, will you read it? Yeah.
So by 2026, the number of people from BAME groups, those are Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups with dementia, is expected to grow by nearly 1, 50,000, 2, 60,000, or 3, 35,000. Oh. Well, again, this is according to the 2011 census, and it's actually 50,000. But we think it's a lot higher than that, and it's expected to increase exponentially over the next 25, 50 years, a lot more. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Questions? Yes, there's loads. There's one lady here.
Okay. Lady there, yeah, in the
Yep, the
big
orange.
jacket. Yeah, orange. I'm colourblind, yes.
I too have been a carer in the past, and in fact was for my mother, who had lived with dementia. And it made me set up a care company. My background is as a nurse in the NHS and then into public health. One of the things I just wanted to ask, one of the things I've always thought about, as we recruit, quite often one of the things we look for is a personal experience around care and caring for a loved one, because we find that gives usually an empathetic nature, and we feel we can train people to do the tasks involved in caring in the community, but we can't get the attitudes right if they don't come with that. One of the things I've always been nervous about is actually explicitly looking for people who have had care experience directly with a loved one with dementia. And I just wondered what your view was on that. People often volunteer that at an interview, and usually they're the people who work out to be our most excellent carers, I would say. But it's just about, we know there's a great shortage of care workers in this country. And the other thing I meant to say this morning when Andrea was there, you know, the negative perceptions that are out there are actually stopping an awful lot of people who would be good carers from applying for jobs, because they're nervous about being involved in abuse scandals and all sorts of perceptions. So it's just really, you know, any thoughts you have on whether we should be explicitly looking for people who've had care experience, and at what point do you think, after they've perhaps given up that role because of a bereavement, or you know they're no longer looking after them, as you say, they've moved into another setting, when is it right to do that?
From my personal experience, people after my mum passed away, he said, "Oh, you'll be going into care work now." And to be honest, that was the last thing I wanted to do. Takes a very special person to be a care worker, I think. And, I do think they need to be valued more. But it's something I couldn't do. I could only do it for my mum. I don't know about Shahid.
I'm the same. I think it's quite rare to be a male carer, especially from a minority background. As with Louise, I don't think it was something that you prepare for, to be a carer. But to be able to care for somebody else is not related to you. I think it's very difficult, and you have to be, I agree, a very special person to be able to do that.
I think it can help, but I know a lady that runs a care company that's fine with being a care worker, but she said she couldn't do it for a mum, which amazed me. So I think it can help, but, they might have, I suppose the danger might be they might have preset, well, I did this with my mum, or I did that with my dad. I don't know. It's difficult to comment on that, yeah. Donna.
Sorry.
Hello. I think that was excellent. I was at another sort of group, and a carer said a personal story was that after she had to was advised to put her dad in a care home, she obviously, the benefits get cut extremely quickly. She has to organise selling the house and all sorts, become homeless, blah, blah, blah. She had to go to the job centre, and the person said, "So you've got a 6-year gap in your CV?" And she said, "Well, I was caring for my dad for 6 years at home." And they said, "What else were you doing?" So what can
This
Tide
proves,
do?
I mean, there's so many more we could have chosen.
What can Tide do to help the carer kind of, I don't know, make the skills that we know we have to be valued by others, because you feel as if you're invisible. The professionals are just hanging about waiting for you to crack so they can whack your loved one in a care home. That's my personal opinion. So it's very, and I wouldn't go into care work. I was a nurse, and I wouldn't do it because it's undervalued, underpaid, and extremely hard work. And I think it needs to be higher valued, but that's my 10 pence. But yes, how can we make all those skills that we have valued practically?
I think it's a carers network like Tide speaking out about it, like we've just done, but also getting carers and former carers to recognise they have these skills, because I didn't know. You often hear that it's like just a housewife, just a carer, but it needs to be recognised as so much more than that.
It's the hardest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, it's 24/7 as well.
Paid work in a heartbeat.
Yeah. I don't know if you've got any.
Check the next question.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment about former carers going into care work, and say that I kind of agree with you three that I cared for my mum who had vascular dementia, and I'm a qualified nurse as well. So when I qualified, the last thing I would have wanted to do would be going to care, as in care for older people with dementia, and I'm totally honest about that because I was a casualty sister and it's a totally different spectrum. But I think the danger of taking people who've been caring for relatives and assuming that they will be good carers in a care home is quite dangerous, because you are caring for your relative, your loved one who has a particular condition, and you are doing it in a particular way that works for you and the person you're caring for. And that's totally different to being in an institutionalised situation where you have lots of people, you have a time constraint for one thing, and you also have the usual paperwork to complete and time constraint on what you do, because you've got to get it done within so many minutes, etc., etc. And quite frankly, I think anybody that's cared for a loved one at home going into that situation will say, no, thank you.
I think these skills are transferable to any profession, I would say. That's our point. It's not just, it's not, I never even thought about going into care work till somebody, and as I do this role, people say, oh, you've gone into care work. I said, no, I haven't. It's a totally different thing. You've gone into advocacy. Advocacy, yes.
Any other questions? Yeah.
I'll come in now. My name's Tracy Payne from Belong. We build and operate villages for predominantly older people and support people living with dementia until the end of life. But increasingly, we're building and responding to needs within local communities, and are just about to open a village for people in South Manchester, the Jewish community, who approached us. So we're doing that in partnership. And I'm very interested in the Asian community and listening to the challenges that you have, knowing that where we currently are building in South Manchester, only 2 miles up the road is an Asian community which must have the same issues, really. And it was whether the question was where is the answer for you? Is it that there is opportunity for partnerships, or is it the Asian community themselves that need to respond?
I think this is where there is this paradox. I think people often assume that the problem lies within the communities. So, it's being branded hard to reach, seldom heard. So it's almost blaming the communities for being hard to reach. And I take exception to that because the communities exist. I'm from Rochdale, not far from Manchester. We have to engage. The dynamics, as I said earlier, are changing. The concept of extended families are changing. Young people are actually leaving the areas. They are seeking better opportunities, and what we find is an increasing issue of social isolation amongst even South Asian elders, which was never thought of. We have a sheltered accommodation home in Rochdale called Cooperstown House. It's not a nursing home. Now, one of the issues we have in Rochdale, in I suppose the Muslim and the South Asian community, is this perception, and they tend to conflate nursing homes, residential homes, all the same thing, but they're not. I think we need to make the distinction. Mum was in a high dependency nursing home for her dementia, but the stigma is still there. The expectation from my family was that I should be looking after Mum. So what we have to do is change the mindset of the community, and the kind of work that I do at a local level. I go on local radio, speaking Punjabi and Urdu, and talk about my own experience and the fact that how things are changing. So it has to be a twofold approach. I think we need to have the services which are still not geared up to meet the needs of the community, of the diverse communities, but we also need to work with the communities to empower them more, for them to become more resilient. So it's not it's not a one size fits all, and it's not just one side. It's got to be a partnership, as you were saying. So if you had the Jewish community approach you in Manchester, then clearly they've accepted the fact that there is an issue in the community. I think the community that I'm from, we still have the issue of them accepting that there's an issue. Dementia, again, is still not recognised, and what people often do is they don't recognise the signs of dementia, and they'll put it down to black magic. They'll go to a faith healer or a faith leader, and if they come across a charlatan, they'll, with my mum had vascular dementia, and we know people from minority groups are more prone, and vascular dementia is more prevalent within the South Asian, the BME community. So it's more preventable. So if we can get to a point where people are accepting dementia as a disease of the brain, as a condition, as opposed to a mental health issue, or black magic or witchcraft, then that's part of the battle that we have to address. But certainly, I think partnership it's definitely the way forward. Thank you. Yes.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
The microphone.
Yeah.
I think I'm coming slightly out of order here, but there was something,
No.
Louise, that you said that I thought I would like to just add to. You mentioned when you were finally bereaved, the difficulty you'd had in working out where your place was.
Yes.
And I think sometimes, yes, carers can be absolutely a carer and lose their place other than being a carer, but a lot of carers are balancing two lives, almost a sort of schizophrenic approach to the whole thing. And I thought I'd just share something from a personal level with you. Two little incidents, if you like. The first was I cared for my mom for nearly 10 years myself, whilst my children were 9 and 7 when this started. I was teaching part-time and so on, lots going on. And battled to keep this thing going. And thank goodness with the help of a brilliant day centre where my mum loved going, so I was very lucky. She loved going there. But when finally my health began to give way because of being a carer and trying to do something that had become absolutely 24-hour job, I told the lead at this fantastic day centre that Mum finally was going to be going into care. And her response was, "But you're doing so well."
Oh,
And she absolutely didn't understand. She was an amazing woman, and it's the only time I've ever known her be perhaps insensitive.
Yeah.
She couldn't understand that everybody has a limit.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we have to be aware of the appearance of somebody, not necessarily letting you know what's going on under the water. And when I finally was bereaved, and by then I was running the butterfly scheme, and that was a very, very busy role, lots and lots to do. You can imagine at the time of bereavement, lots of pressure on time and trying to keep the two things up in the air at the same time. I had by then, because Mum in the final 3 years was in care, and I was visiting her every single day, the key time for her was between 4 and 6, so I was always there if I was in the area, which was most days, between 4 and 6, but at other times too. That period between 4 and 6 where I had so much pressure on my time to get so many jobs done, I couldn't do a thing. I'd sit at the kitchen table and stare into space because I didn't know how to use that time other than for my mum.
Yeah.
And there I was running something nationally, I hope competently, but as a carer, I was completely lost at that point. And I think perhaps I just wanted to share that with you on a personal level to try and help you understand perhaps that what's on the surface isn't necessarily the background of what's happening to the carer.
I'll just add one comment to that. I had the help of a wonderful Admiral nurse to get me back on my feet as well. So that's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
I think we've got our marching orders. Thank you.